I said here, viewers of Equinoxe Television, 6 p.m. by studio clock. We thank you so much for joining us in this edition of the news. We begin right away with our major stories. The journalism family in Cameroon is expressing worries over the alleged disappearance of one of the years. Martinez Zongo has been declared missing by his close ones for some time now because his whereabouts still remains unknown. And is the journalism profession under threat in Cameroon? We'll tell you more in this edition of the news. Stay with us. Welcome back, viewers. We begin this edition of the news in the southwest region, precisely in Kumba, where the corpse, an unidentified corpse, has been discovered by locals in Kumba, precisely at Fomenki Street in Boya Road. Was that person murdered before dumped at Fomenki Street? Let's now have more with our reporter Smart Jikan Gabriel.
Even though physically disabled, he has been arrested by the elements of the investigative unit of the Gendarmerie Brigade in Banga, Mongo Division of the Littoral Region. The man, who is in his late 40s, has been accused of extorting the sum of 100,000 francs CFA from a woman she lives with in the same house. I told him that my uncle was sick, so I took him to the hospital, but he escaped that I have not paid the money.
2 days after, they called me say my uncle don't want to hospital. I don't know me as I will do.
Later, he called informing me that I have been summoned in Lum. I was surprised how they got to me because I'm based in Banga, but he promised to see a lawyer on my behalf. When I returned and I asked for the summon letter, it wasn't available.
The money I say, Uncle give with all confidence. I know the fear. My uncle give 60 mil.
The absence of a receipt pushed the same lawyer the accused claimed to have given the money to write against him to the elements of the investigative unit of the Gendarmerie Brigade in Banga.
After 1 week, my uncle came.
1 week after the payment of 100,000 francs CFA to the lawyer, I asked if there was a receipt. He said yes, but since I started asking for this receipt, he kept turning me. Reasons why I had to report the case to the lawyer who wrote a complaint to the commander of the gendarme unit charged with investigation to handle the case.
For that kind of place, they give receipt for advance for money. You say you don't get your own problem. I don't go stop them. Excuse me, they don't give me a receipt.
The security officials are now looking for a means to settle the issue between the man and the woman. At Fomenki Street in the Kumba 1 subdivision, it was an abandoned corpse that woke up the inhabitants. The inhabitants woke up to discover the lifeless body of a man whose hands and feet were tied behind. Most inhabitants of the neighborhood say the man is not a member of that neighborhood, but they are suspecting that he could be a thief who has been beaten in another neighborhood and dumped in their area. Informed about the situation, the divisional officer of Kumba 1, Ali Anubu, and security forces descended to the scene. Checks made by doctors showed that apart from his hands and feet tied, he also had several wounds on his body. The lifeless body was later tied up and taken away, with investigations on course to know what actually happened.
And now we take you to the government bilingual high school in Mombo in the Mongo division of the Littoral region. The building is completely dilapidated. The roof is falling off, and the building, the people or the pupils and the students of that school say the building is totally old. The authorities say they have written to the authorities concerned to no avail. Let's now have more in this report with Lucille Yengo Esie.
Government bilingual high school Mombo in a dilapidated state. The school is found in Banga, Mongo Division, Littoral region. The bushy nature of the school is an attraction to snakes and reptiles. The school blown off roofs and shattered doors has hindered the learning process.
The difficult we have in the class is overhaul and snake.
Some students are forced to study in an open air due to insufficient classrooms.
Nous avons vraiment des difficultés en salle de classe.
We have a lot of difficulties in classrooms, reason students are forced to study outside. Like Katiem Espanol, they study under a tree due to insufficient classes.
Avec le professeur, parce que la classe est occupée par la série allemande.
For more than 3 years, studying in a conducive atmosphere has become impossible, mostly during the raining season that comes with heavy rains.
Ce lycée doit être refait d'une bonne manière.
This school has to be reconstructed. How can a school be found in a forest? These are projects the government had to consider, because if we are talking about leaders of tomorrow, we talk of these children. We have cried a lot.
Si nous voulons réellement, nous parlons du Cameroun de demain. C'est à travers les pareilles actions.
Ngonso Pierre, the president of Parents Teachers Association, complains they are forced to use the money received from the Parents Teachers Association to run the school, which is sometimes not enough to manage the school affairs.
Et d'autres même n'arrivent pas à payer la pension.
A complicated situation for the school authorities, who say they have written to the Regional Council of Mombo for assistance to no avail.
La décentralisation nous fait encore défaut.
The government has failed us because everything is made up of speeches. Nothing is done. It is a shame for us to be talking of a dilapidated school in Mombo. If we had moves from the government, sometimes goats even find their resting place in the uncompleted classes. We don't even have toilets here.
Nous avons crié, finalement nous n'avons que les yeux pour pleurer.
They call on government authorities to respond to their plight.
And now we take you to Betua, where insecurity is said to be on the rise with the increasing number of commercial bike riders in the East Regional Headquarters. The locals complain that criminals pose for commercial bike riders to rob the local population. Let's now have more with Mala Glory.
Over 7,000 commercial bike riders circulate in the town of Betua, the East region of the country. Commercial bike riding, the people say it is an activity which facilitates the infiltration of criminals in the sector. Many think they can make money through commercial bike riding, but tend to forget that the most important is security, meaning if people can put personal interests aside, the sector can be regulated. There is lack of application of appropriate measures so that each biker can at least have all his documents. The divisional officer for the Lom and Jerem division say commercial bike riders in Betua do not respect public order. He calls on the transport syndicate to act accordingly. We need them to be conscious of what is expected of them in the development of the sector. You have heard of some of them pretending to be commercial bike riders, while some syndicate collect money with the objective to produce documents for these bikers, but in the end embezzle the money. He adds that these will give way to foreigners to get into the sector, thus increasing the rate of insecurity in the town of Betua. He says those found guilty will face the law, a decision that was unanimously welcomed by commercial bike riders in the town of Betua.
And now we told you in the headlines, viewers, that the journalism family in Cameroon is expressing worries over the disappearance of one of theirs, the forceful disappearance of Martinez Zogor, station manager of Amplitude FM in Yaoundé, has been qualified as a scandal and serious attack on press freedom in Cameroon. As staffman Babila Jonathan talked to some journalists and compared their views in the following report. We come back to this report by Babila Jonathan. It says that the forceful disappearance of Martinez Zogor, station manager of Amplitude FM, has been qualified as a scandal and serious attack on press freedom in Cameroon. And Babila Jonathan talked with some journalists in the country. She compared their views in the following report.
In the alleged abduction of Cameroonian journalist Martinez Zogo, host of a popular program Amplitude radio station in Yaoundé, journalists across the 10 regions have raised fresh concerns over the safety of journalists in Cameroon.
Remember cases of colleagues like Nene Nefo, Samuel Wazize. The numbers are so many. Recently, the publisher of Le Messager newspaper had to spend some hours in detention. As we speak, a colleague of ours is being looked for, Martin Zogo. Till now, his whereabouts is yet to be known. So I think that generally, Cameroon is not in a good record.
He goes ahead to cite some journalists who have been threatened for doing their job. To him, this has brought lots of fears given that their constitutional role of informing the population is threatened.
So Cameroon generally is yet to understand the place of a journalist. Cameroon is yet to understand that the journalist is what we normally call the fourth estate, which means that after the legislative, the judiciary and the executive, the journalist is there. But in Cameroon, it's a shame that the position of a journalist is yet to be known. We pray that in the days ahead, a journalist's position should be understood. Thank you.
Journalists residing in the conflict-hit northwest and southwest regions have reportedly been targeted by either government forces or separatist fighters, making it extremely difficult for them to exercise their duties.
There has been no time as difficult as now to be a journalist in the northwest and south. I think that more than ever before, journalists need protection because as it stands, for those who dare to raise their head above the truth, you risk your life either in front of non-state armed groups as well as state armed groups or as well as the state, because as it stands, issues around freedom of expression are put under serious challenge. Worse still, press freedom in Cameroon is under very serious attack, and we think that more than ever before, the media professionals deserve attention.
Given the sensitive duties of journalists, the Cameroonian government is urged to be more proactive when it comes to the welfare and safety of journalists.
And now we talk something else, our viewers. As the senatorial election approaches, preparations are going on within various political parties who are called upon to deposit their files before January 28. But the socio-political atmosphere in the northwest and the southwest regions of the country continues to be tensed with the Anglophone crisis at a time when separatist leaders in the diaspora are calling for the boycott of the senatorial election in the English-speaking regions of Cameroon. The Elekan bosses of the Bui and the Momo division of the northwest region of Cameroon have been killed by yet to be identified gunmen, and the two Elekan bosses who were killed have already been replaced. And now we move on to this obituary. Viewers, the mortal remains of Makusa icon Jene Gento has been removed from the mortuary that was today, and at the mortuary was present several of his colleagues or other artists who came to bid him farewell. And we will be coming back detailing to the corpse removal of Jene Gento that will be in the subsequent editions of the news. Now let's listen to some of his colleagues, other artists who were at the mortuary this morning.
Gento, like any other creative artist, has succeeded in putting his name in this world before he leaves. He is my generation, and if I can regret one thing, it's just because he is going so young, too young, and since everybody has to go, he will go and the music will remain, and we will leave behind to remember him through his work of art.
In the hearts of all Cameroonian artists, today that we mourn the loss of a big star, an icon of Cameroon music. Jene would be remembered by all artists as a fighter, somebody who fought for the general interest, not individual interest, somebody who wanted things to work for artists. Today we have fought, we are almost coming out of the problems that have existed. And I feel particularly sad that he will not be there to enjoy the fruits of his labor. And that's why I say that I will do everything to ensure that his family, his children, benefit from his author's right 50 years after his death, to ensure that he did not fight for nothing. He was a big artist, a big Cameroonian artist, somebody who raised the flag of Cameroon very high. His music will remain forever in the hearts of Cameroonians. And that's why I say an artist never dies.
And viewers, that does it for the first part of the news. Talking Point comes up next. On Talking Points tonight, we are talking about threats on the journalism profession, especially with the recent alleged kidnapping of a journalist in the nation's political capital, Martinez Zogo. His whereabouts has been unknown even to his close collaborators and even close ones for some time now. And in this edition of Talking Points, we'll be talking with a journalist, especially journalists who are exercising their functions in the warring regions of the country, the Northwest and the Southwest regions. Our guest tonight is Clifford Ntuba, who is a journalist in Kumba. Clifford, thank you so much for accepting to be our guest on Talking Point tonight. We are talking about journalism being under threat. We are talking about press freedom as well. As a journalist exercising your functions in Kumba, which is a war-torn area in the southwest region of the country, do you, as a journalist, see press freedom possible in Cameroon?
The situation of press freedom in Cameroon, to me, is still questionable. Because almost every week, we hear of a journalist being arrested. Why is a journalist being arrested? Because he's doing his job. I'm not saying that there are not journalists who are maybe they go beyond the ethics and deontology of the profession. If a journalist goes out of the ethics and deontology, you should be questioned. Okay? But in most of the cases, we hear of journalists who have been arrested because of their job. So you ask yourself, is the press freedom existing? Yes, on text papers, yes, in offices, yes. But practically it doesn't. Why do I say so also? I know it will be very difficult to digest what I'm going to say now. The editorial policy of some media organs do not give the journalists that freedom to exercise their vocation freely. And due to this reason, it makes the journalists feel imbalanced. Now, I don't want to talk about, or let me give you an example. If a media organ is being promoted by a multinational company here in Cameroon, and that company fails to pay salaries of its workers or contractors, and they go on to the streets to reivindicate their rights, which is justly, and such journalist goes out to do the coverage. We've heard most of them will take the angle, they have already started payment, but they will continue later. But you don't find them elaborating the context under which these same workers live with their children. Those analysis, investigative aspect is not done because their policy is there and is prone to protect the interests of its promoters. So does that journalist stand free to express their vocation? No. So we should not only see the aspect of press freedom from the government's arrest and that, yes, those words are there, they are there every year and then, so to me it's no news because it has always been there. But for us to get out of it, we need to be very firm in our practice. So if you ask me, Annabella, that the situation of press freedom in Cameroon,
we are talking about journalists being able to express themselves freely, being able to go about their jobs normally like any other profession in Cameroon, and seeing how that can be possible in Cameroon like it obtains in other countries. Clifford, now in what conditions, to my next question, in what conditions do journalists, especially those who are there in ground zero. In what condition do they carry out their job? Are they not really afraid of being trapped between maybe the military and separatist fighters? Because you're in ground zero, you're in Kumba.
It is very difficult within the context of Cameroon for journalists to do their report objectively. It's very difficult. There are so many factors that causes a journalist not to be able to do an objective reporting. Now, I'll take it from this other aspect. Like I said in the previous question, and the editorial policy of that media organ can cause that journalist not to be objective. But the most interesting part which I want to elaborate here is poor salary scale. Poor salary scale can cause a journalist to go to the level of what we call gombo, where that gombo controls your scripts. The gombo makes you write call AB. A man stole and is able to pay and tell the man that the man was just there, but we are not sure he stole because we did not see. The facts which you have, you don't bring it because you're protecting your personal interest because of poor salary scale. There are a lot of people who do promotion of politicians in Cameroon. They write good stories about them. Okay, you're writing the stories, convincing the electorates, and then putting the community in doom. Because of your story, they trusted you as a journalist, you collected money and you wrote a story that will favor the interest of that politician and you. But what is responsible for that? Poor salary scale. They have to leave. The journalists must leave. When they watch you guys and Abila on set, oh, everyone wants to be like you. Yes, everyone wants to look like you. So you have to look good. So how do you survive with the poor salary scale? You're forced not to find yourself doing such malpractices, which actually hampers the ethics and the authority of this noble vocation. Also, on the other part, the state also has its own role that causes journalists cause them to be very afraid not to be objective because of fear of enormous arrest. So when the journalists find themselves in such situations where you are not able to report objectively, then I'll tell you, and it's difficult because it's practically difficult for journalists in Cameroon to do objectively. There are very few handful courageous who do objective reporting. I'm not saying that they don't exist, any they do, but on a spectrum, it's not proportionate. It's not proportionate at all. So the reasons I see the government on one side and its policies, and also promoters with their poor salary scales and policies, so objectiveness in journalism and reporting becomes a problem.
And now, Clifford, I'm going to put my question in other words. The coming generation, when they look at what is happening now in the world, how journalists are being treated with all the menace, all the threats, and all the arrests, disappearances, and even kidnapping somehow, do you think it can deter the upcoming generation somehow from the journalism profession?
In the southwest region, it's no different from that of Iraq during the Iraq-Iran war. But the difference there is seen on the insurance that those international journalists receive and protection which they receive. Here in Cameroon, in the southwest region, a journalist who wants to be objective, who wants to respect the ethics and deontology of this profession, reporting this situation, the ongoing situation, is trapped between two giants. If that journalist wants to be objective, you become a threat on the other parties. So for a journalist to report here, you have to water down a lot of your reporting. You water down a lot of facts which you have gathered. Because if you report the interests of one party, which are the facts, you become an enemy to the other. So that's the case with the media men and women in this part of the republic. Going even down to the field, it's a problem. And some are even being targeted at home. So do you want to become a target to an unknown person? Because you will not know if it's coming from the separatists or coming from the military. But whatever they do. We want to believe that the administration is supposed to give them that protection, but through the best of my information, most of the journalists do their reporting, protecting themselves and their media outlets. You know what you call the watered down journalism, where you just give information headlines and then the content of it you are afraid to bring. That's what happens here. So for a journalist to succeed here is very difficult. That's the reason why some give out all their facts to other media outlets. They do their investigations and they give it to other outlets, and even to Francophone Annabella. Some English-speaking journalists are afraid to report facts that they will be they'll be called either pro-government or pro-terrorist. So they give it to the French Francophone colleagues.
Clifford, you just mentioned there that some journalists who are in the northwest and the southwest regions, they feel very insecure going about their activities. Sometimes you just mentioned there that they are forced to give the information to other media organs who are this other way of the Mungu, so they can publish, because they don't know if they're going to have, if they have freedom before expression. The freedom after expression is not very much guaranteed. Don't you think the government also has its responsibility? Don't you think the government should protect journalists some more than what they have been doing? Or should journalists just continue relying on trade unions?
Annabella, this is a question which, to me, even the televiewers are really aware that the practice of journalism in Cameroon is really threatened. How many of your colleagues have been called to book? How many have been suspended? How many have been threatened? How many of the programs have been threatened? That's already an answer to this question, Annabella. We watch the various media organs and we know how Equinoxe have been on total constant attacks. So you ask yourself, is this profession threatened? Yes, it is. It's not only threatened, even the professionals behind the scene are threatened. They're threatened. But when we were growing up, we knew that journalism and journalists are the full arm of the government. But today, where is the place of the journalist? I'll take for instance, in a country like Ghana, if a journalist invites you on his talk show, you're a minister and you don't come, by then the late Rollins, you are questioned, you will be called to book. You have skeletons. But who are you to call a director on set? You have to go through protocols and protocols and protocols. At the end of the day, it's a representative you see. So your practice, and when you insist, if I just do my head like this, you know what that means, right? So the practice is really threatened. The number of journalists don't want to call the names, you know, of Equinoxe and other media houses have been questioned and suspended. So how does that young student, scholar, who just picked up advanced level, feels vis-a-vis this vocation? They don't know what is going on, Annabella, they want to become. Because when they watch Annabella on sets, everybody wants to be, the ladies want to be like you. But the truth is, once they get into the university and start discovering this fact, do you know how many of them have changed faculties? Do you know how many have changed departments? Because they discovered that they will not be. Those frank lecturers tell them, what you have here is different from what you meet on the film. And so when they start finding out, doing their own research and discover how journalists have been treated, some have quit, some even did journalism, but they don't want to work with any media organs. They do public communication with corporate bodies, go to companies and look for jobs, and sit in their offices and turn on their wheelchairs. To broadcast, they are scared because the profession is threatened. So for the young ones coming, I think we really need to do a lot, because it can cause.
Clifford, remind you of the same opinion that young professionals might be scared to get into broadcasting, especially those in the English-speaking regions of the country. But I come back to my question, government responsibility. don't you think the government should protect the journalists some more, considering the important role the journalist plays in the society? We know the journalist is the watchdog. We know the journalist is the agenda setter. Shouldn't the government protect the journalists some more, so we don't get news of journalists being kidnapped, they are disappeared, they are being questioned, and all of those, some of them even might even lose their lives in the course of exercising their professions? Shouldn't the government add some more security to the journalism profession and the journalists themselves? Or, like I said, should we just continue relying on trade unions?
I think the state, the government has a lot to do for the protection of media practitioners. It is within the context of the law. Every profession needs state protection. That's the facts. But now, do you want us to talk about the facts and realities? Sometimes the facts are there, but the reality on the field is different. So do the journalists have protection from the government? Then you come back to the latter question. Why are some of the journalists of Equinoxe being questioned, someone suspended? Is it because of malpractice? You ask yourself those questions, and I think you have an answer to that. But the state has that duty to do that. But when the state fails to do that, I think the syndicates should step up their game even more. Even if the government is doing it, the syndicates represent the interest of its members. So nobody can do it better than you yourself. So I think the journalist syndicates like Kamasej, like SNJC should come up and step up their game. We should have a coalition to become a stronger force that the government will reckon with. If you don't give value to yourself, you don't expect your neighbor to do that for you. So I think if there's anybody I'll hold liable here, I'll hold the syndicates. Because the moment the syndicates step up their game, protecting their members, like I think there are some Kamasej members who went through some difficulties. I don't want to call their name here or set, but I think you saw how Kamasej, SNJC, how they mobilized, went to Boya, and it was really a sport reporter. The sport reporter who was battered in Boya, you saw the reaction immediately. So it is the syndicates that has more to step up, and the government will accompany. So that's what I think in this case. So let the syndicates do their job and do it rightly.
Thank you so much, Clifford Ntuba, for accepting to talk to us on Talking Points tonight. You're a journalist and you're based in Kumba. Viewers, thank you so much for being with us. Stay with us on Equinoxe Television.